She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I tell you, it's your business to keep track of what's happening on the political front and, really kind of get a clue about who you're going to vote for president. You've got such a wonderful selection, well, at least a large one. Another guy that joined the list was Ben Carson last week, and I write a regular column over there at Huffington Post, and this one really kind of blew up. Over 1,000 comments, over a couple hundred, over 1,000 likes, and a couple of hundred comments, and a lot of traction featured there in the politics section. And they, of course, loved the title, Why Ben Carson Cannot Win. But I know they probably struggled with the thesis. And I know they read my stuff. They only publish about 90 to 95%. So they probably read the first few paragraphs and said, nut job, but it's an interesting take. So they went ahead and did it, and they featured it. It was one of their lead articles for about 10 hours, which is a long time in the Huffington Post universe. And so I was grateful for their willingness to allow me to take pop shots at the liberal media.
That's why I had the bumper music as She Loves You.
Yes.
Ariana Huffington, She loves you.
Yes. And so, and by the way, that was Sigmund Kramer. But it was cool. It was interesting. The reason why I think it caught on was the fact that I call it, what did I call it? I called it ideological plantation.
Yeah.
I said Ben Carson is a black who's trying to get off of the ideological plantation.
He is off the ideological plantation.
That the media wants to keep. The media's view is that if you're a woman or any minority, you don't have any right to be anything but a progressive, because if it weren't for progressive policies, you wouldn't even have the right to vote, let alone run for office. Well, that's the media's take on it. And it's one thing to have that perspective, which I think is wrong. I think it's wrong for media to be in the bed with any worldview, but to actually be the enforcer of it, they're literally the enforcer of that worldview. It's really quite scandalous if you think about it.
Well, but what isn't? I mean, everything in politics right now is scandalous, but then, it's all so accepted. It's also okay. So nothing is really blowing up as a scandal. And I think you're right. If you dare to, steer your boat away from the party line of being a Democrat, being a liberal, if you're a minority, if you are, and that includes women, although they're not really a minority, but
they're treated like one.
In our culture, they're considered minorities.
A political minority or an institutional minority?
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. There's probably 51% women out of our population, so they're actually in the majority, but they're treated as a minority, and it's sickening to me that good candidates, and I'm not saying Ben Carson's a good candidate, but it's sickening to me that good candidates for the GOP won't be able to really get their message out because they're going to be shoehorned into this whole defensive position. They're up against the ropes from day one. How can you even be in the GOP is basically the story.
Right.
You're black.
Exactly right.
How can you even be
in the GOP? That's exactly right. That ideological plantation, man. And they'd like to keep him stuck, And Ben Carson really showed his limits, in my opinion, when he came out and said that he was going to support an increase in the minimum wage. To me that,
Well, but hold on. You say that. Was he saying, because I didn't read, was he saying that he thinks that it should be $15 an hour?
I think any increase in minimum wage increase with first of all, federal government shouldn't be doing it anyway.
Right,
it should be left to the states
entirely. But since they are,
yeah. But what he should be saying, a better position would be, I want to get rid of the federal minimum wage entirely, and that's a reform that makes sense. And so if California wants to be nutso and have $12 or $13 minimum wages, they can do that. If Texas wants to, maybe even get creative and have sub-minimum wages for places near the valley where they've had chronic unemployment, or Camden, New Jersey wants to do that, or Detroit, Michigan wants to do that, let's have sub-minimum wages and create enterprise zones in areas like that to try to bolster cities that have been perennially depressed. That would be a smart answer. But guys who are apologists for Ben Carson have said things like, have argued that he says that the problem is that with welfare benefits being as high that they are, people don't have an incentive to get on a minimum wage job. And so my view is it's time to change those incentives. We need to do something about the welfare benefits.
So reform welfare benefits.
Yeah.
Don't make it more likely that now. Well, I hear it a lot. Okay, like Walmart and all these other big corporations are basically getting corporate welfare because they don't pay their employees much, and their employees are on welfare, and so we're basically supporting with our tax dollars Walmart's ability to underpay its workforce.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But is that true? Is that accurate?
No, I know, but I know what I'm saying is accurate is the statement, and that
But that's what's that's actually informing the conversation rather than anything else. And Ben Carson is really kind of fallen into that trap.
Yes.
Instead of talking about it from a different perspective,
thinking consequentially. So like I got a friend here who says, Carson says that they make more money on welfare programs with the current minimum wage. So by raising the minimum wage, he gets them off of welfare. I said, right. So the answer is to reduce the incentive for staying on welfare and not create disincentives for the business owners that could offer away from those so-called benefits of welfare.
Yeah.
And so that's what you got to do. That's the kind of rhetoric I'm wanting to hear. Not to mention the fact that a belief in freedom first. And I don't see where putting more onerous on business owners is going to be cultivating freedom.
All we're doing in this country is moving towards a statist, big nanny state kind of a society.
Yeah.
In every aspect, Kevin. And this
cradle to the grave.
And this election is going to put us closer and closer to the Western European style of governance. That's all it's going to do. I don't think that.
So what's the difference now between us and the Western style, or the Western European style? Because I keep hearing that, and the reality is, according to the Heritage Foundation, we spend more money per capita now than any of those Western European countries, except for, I think, Sweden is the only one that we now. Everyone else we outspend per capita. We now have cradle, Obamacare to grave. All the social programs, all the way.
But it's not. It hasn't been cemented yet because we don't have things like daycare that's paid for everyone. That's not there yet. We don't have.
Although a lot of states have that.
We don't have education that's paid for everyone yet. Higher education,
Yeah, but a lot of the countries don't have that.
Yeah, they do.
A lot of them don't. I know, like for example, in England and Germany, they'll tell you about the time your kid's 12 or 13. They're not going to college. That's why we have so many. That's why America is the home of international education.
I know,
because all these people are rejected in their schools all around the world.
But what they're doing is they're trying to push us that direction. This is what I keep hearing in all these comments that I hear from people who are Hillary supporters, who are even more so Bernie Sanders supporters. They want the government to take care of them. They want the government to provide for them, and so they want things like, and they keep calling it free, which just really irks me because it's not free.
Nothing is free in our material world. Everything has a source, a destination, and a price that must be paid.
That's right. And they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it, but they want us to have food paid for, housing paid for. They basically just want a socialist society. That's what they're pushing for. To them, that's utopia. That's the way a civilized and enlightened society should live. And you're going to see it pushed more in that way, to the point that our First Amendment rights really are getting trodden on. You saw it in Garland.
Yeah.
When Geller, who I'm not a fan of Geller, but she put on a display of First Amendment freedom,
free speech event,
and it was not hate speech. It was something that was it was actually protected by the Constitution. But to have people saying that it shouldn't have been protected by the Constitution, that's dangerous.
It is.
But that's where we're going. And see, this is what you don't have in France. This is what you don't have in England. You don't have in Western Europe. So why do we have it here? We don't need it here. That's their point. We don't need guns. We don't need free speech. Free speech, it hurts people's feelings. So let's get rid of it. And that's where we're going. It's not just who's paying for what, and who can get this free. It's also it's a lot more basic than that. It has to do with liberty, and a lot of people here apparently disdain it. They don't want it.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you mentioned utopia in your monogram.
Yeah, and I don't mean the town in Texas.
Well, I thought you were talking about maybe a town in Florida that you spent a week at last week.
Yeah. I was gone for a week. I went to Destin, so my destiny was in Destin.
Yeah,
and a nice beach,
beautiful place, isn't it?
A little bit chillier than I was hoping for. But it is a beautiful area. I used to go down there a lot when I was living in Mobile. And I went to Mobile to visit the battleship, USS Alabama.
Yeah.
Excellent World War II. One of the finest examples of military hardware on display at a museum anywhere.
Yeah, what's the name of that ship in Corpus Christi? Do you know what the name of that one?
The Texas.
Huh?
You're the Texas.
Yeah, I've been on that one.
But that's World War I. That's a dreadnought. That's World War I.
But actually, it was used, though, some in World War II.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's 100 years old.
Pearl Harbor.
It's 100 years old.
Floats. We need to arm it with something.
Yeah, and it's falling apart, and they're trying to get it refurbished. Right now, they're in the process of repainting the Alabama. And by the way, after Katrina, no one talks about Mobile. They got hammered by Katrina. Biloxi, Mississippi got destroyed. You only hear about New Orleans. But so many other areas got damaged.
Obliterated.
And Mobile Bay was one of them. And so the battleship listed 7 degrees, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. And now they've returned it to 3, so they don't have it right yet. But the submarine, the drum that was there, they've had to bring it up out of the water. They can't leave it in the water anymore because of all the damage it sustained. But they've refurbished it, and it's better than it was 20 years ago when I used to go visit it. You can go on board and just tour the whole thing. If you've never been, there are a few examples that are better for maritime, naval stuff than that place. They have an SR-71
Texas
Blackbird.
was cool too, though. And I don't know. The doctor's office, those huge filing cabinets that they have at a doctor.
Sure,
that's essentially what you sleep in the Texas. I mean, the space is probably about 2 feet, and I kept hitting my head all night, with dreams and stuff like that, and kept dreaming I was on a boat.
Did you actually spent the night on it?
There. I slept in that. I slept in one of those drawers. And it was I don't know how people actually did this. But it was a Boy Scout deal.
Okay, I was going to say, they do the same thing at the Alabama. The cots are a little bit bigger, but they're still not comfortable. And I just keep thinking,
horrible.
Yeah, I keep thinking, night. Man, that's one of those Boy Scout experiences you get all psyched for, and then afterwards you're like, what was I thinking?
I was totally not psyched for it. and is this my turn to volunteer?
Yeah.
And but I'm glad I did it. It was kind of a cool thing to do. I could cross it off my bucket list. I could cross off the fact that I officiated a wedding on Sunday. I didn't mention that on yesterday's show, but yeah, I officiated a wedding. Very dear friends of mine got married, and they know that in a previous life, I was an ordained and licensed minister, and so they asked me to officiate that wedding, and that was a cool thing to have done. And we did it at the Arboretum, which is a really neat place to do it.
Yeah, so I hope that everyone got sprayed down with off beforehand.
I wish we had. I was fighting them off during the entire ceremony. And what else?
So everyone's going to get West Nile. So the honeymoon will be ruined.
But we all know, we'll remember where it happened. So,
right.
it was a beautiful day that it happened. And then, I'm trying to think what else. A very, very, one of the most...
You lost your left leg.
No, nothing like that. Although there are rumors of alligators, but I don't think I've ever seen any in that place. But it looks like a place alligators would live. But
the mosquitoes ate them all.
One of my favorite professors, definitely the most influential professor in my life, Dr. Arlie Hoover. He's been dead for months, but I only just found out yesterday that he had passed away. He had died in December. And one of those guys who's certainly a dinosaur. He believed in absolute truths. Wrote about that. Wrote a great book called Dear Agnos, which is a book addressing agnostics.
Yeah.
A phenomenal book. Brilliant, incredibly brilliant historian.
Was he at Abilene?
Abilene Christian University. I took more classes with him than all the other history professors combined. I grabbed every course I could get under him. And in fact, he used to let me teach some of his courses whenever he was out. I would guest teach his particularly his military history courses. He was just amazing, and was very sad to hear about his parting. And the worst part about it is that he apparently had been living in Deer Park for the last couple of years and passed away in Pasadena. And so knowing that he was so close, but yet so far, it was kind of sad.
Yeah.
I'm going to be visiting Abilene next month, and he was on my list of people to see.
Oh, and he was so close and you didn't even know it.
That's so weird, yeah. So anyway, look up Arlie Hoover. Any book by Arlie Hoover is phenomenal. Dear Agnos in particular is a really good book, an outstanding book on. He was a PhD in history, but his first degree was in Bible, and that's a book on Christian apologetics that I strongly recommend. And so with all of that, I'm looking forward to seeing what other adventures we have in future programs. But we got a great guest coming up, someone who has some of the coolest companies in the world, and I'm using quotation marks for the listener who can't see, as clients. And I'm looking forward to that segment coming up next right here on The Price of Business.